Welcome back, everybody. Moving on to the next example, we have a company with sales of $6,000, total assets of $3,000, and a debt-to-equity ratio of 1.5. If its return on equity is 15%, what is its net income? Now, before moving on, if you don't feel like writing this question out, I put a link in the description box below to lecture notes that has all of these examples already written out for you. So if you don't feel like writing it out, you could just click that link, print out those lecture notes, and the process will be smoother for you. Now, the first thing hopefully you recognize in this question is that the information that we're given, the return on equity, debt to equity ratio, total assets, sales, it all relates back to the Dupont identity. So I wrote out the Dupont identity right here. Return on equity is equal to profit margin times total asset turnover times equity multiplier. And then getting a little bit more specific, we know that profit margin equals net income over sales, total asset turnover, sales over assets, and then equity multiplier is assets over equity. And now notice also how we're asked for net income, and net income is a part of the profit margin ratio. So if we can take this Dupont identity and then plug everything else in, or have numbers for everything else besides net income, then net income would be our unknown variable and we can solve for it. So for now, let's just solve for that whole bracket, that whole profit margin variable, and then we can get into the specifics of figuring out net income. Now let's focus on the other ratios. So going ahead and plugging everything in that we have so far, return on equity, the left side of the Dupont identity, we are given as 15%. Profit margin we're solving for. Sales over assets, we're given the sales figure of $6,000 and then the assets figure of $3,000. And now this equity multiplier, we know it's assets over equity, but we are given the debt to equity ratio. So we're going to have to take this debt to equity ratio and manipulate it in a way to get an assets over equity ratio. And as I mentioned before, whenever you're given a decimal, you always want to put it over 1. And now with this new ratio, you want to make a mini balance sheet. So we know that our debt has to equal 1.5. Our equity is equal to 1. And since the right side and left side have to balance, the debt plus equity is equal to 2.5, which represents our left side, the assets. And now we can figure out what our assets over equity ratio is. It's basically equal to 2.5 over 1, which is just 2.5. So we know that our equity multiplier is 2.5. So now let's do some algebra here. So 6,000 over 3,000, we know that's equal to 2. And then 2 times 2.5, that gives us 5 here. And we're multiplying that 5 by the profit margin. And that right side is still equal to our left side of 15%. And since we're solving for the profit margin, we want to isolate for that. So we have to divide both sides by this 5 that's attached to the profit margin. So then we end up getting the profit margin equaling 3%, which is 15% divided by 5. However, we're not asked to find the profit margin, we're asked to find the actual net income figure. But we know that the profit margin is equal to the net income over the sales. And we have the profit margin, we have the sales, so we can solve for the net income. Now, one thing to note before continuing on, this profit margin can either be given in decimals or it can be given in percentages. However, if this profit margin is given in percentages, then it's like we're multiplying this right side here by 100, because usually your net income is going to be less than your sales. So if you just divide net income by sales, you're going to get a decimal figure. So to solve for the net income, what we want to do is we want to take this profit margin of 3% and put it as a decimal on the left side. So the profit margin would be 0.03. And then we would have net income as X, because that's the variable that we're solving for. And then our sales were given, it's $6,000. And then to solve for X here, we can just put this 0.03 over 1. And now we can just cross multiply. So 1 times X is just X. And then 0.03 times 6,000, that would give us $180. So that there is our final answer. $180 represents our net income. So a more complex question or example than the one we did before with the Dupont identity, instead of just keeping it on this high level view of profit margin, total asset turnover, equity multiplier, we had to actually bring in the technical ratios and then do a little bit of manipulation, solve for profit margin, and then took the profit margin and then solve for net income, which is what we were asked for. Also, to get the equity multiplier, we had to manipulate the debt to equity ratio, make a mini balance sheet, and then we got a assets over equity ratio of 2.5. So lots going on in this question. If you didn't get that fully, make sure you rewatch it again, because this is something that can potentially come up on your midterm. Yo, what's up guys? Thanks for checking out my channel. Hopefully you got some value from the video you just watched. If you did get some value, big favor to ask you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Any questions, any recommendations on things you'd like to see, please leave it in the comments section. Also check out the description box below for links to material and content related to the video you just watched. Peace out.